Alright, so welcome back again. My name is Jesse, and in this wonderful and exciting tutorial on Go for Data Science, we'll be trying to explore about variables, and then we'll move on to some other simple basics before we move on to more into data science. So let's see what we'll be doing. So in the previous session, we saw a little bit, we started on how to set up your place and then how to do something about Go, right? Now let's see how to work with variables and then arrays, then move on to Go statistics in the next session. So let's go back to our workspace. So this is what we're doing in the previous tutorial. So we're trying to see how to continue from there, right? So I'm going to just create another file. So Control-N to create another file here. So I'm going to save this particular file as Go variables, right? So all of them is going to be in the folder Go Basics. Then that's what we'll be trying to work from, right? So let's save this one. I'm going to be saving it in this particular place, right? So let's give the name Go variables. How to work with variables in Go, variables, right? .go. Perfect. So let's start writing some code. So I'll close off the old one. So this was the old one, which is going to be simple hello. Now, the first thing that we said, it must always start with package main, right? To make it executable, right? As we learned earlier on in the anatomy of Go programming language. Remember that when we're trying to about the structure of Go programs, we have the package main, which makes it executable, right? And then we have the imports, and then we also have the function. This main function is the obligatory entry point for our program to run, right? So we have understood this concept. So let's move on to working with variables. So I'll do something very straight with this. Let's go back again, and then let's create our import. And then we are using format to help us see what you are doing. Then the next one is going to be our func, right? Our main function. So function main. I don't know whether you can see it, or I hope you can see it very well, right? Perfect. Yeah. Function main. And then we start writing some code. So this is going to be about variables. So how do you create a variable in Go, right? So let me show you a simple picture to help you understand it well. So this is how to create a variable in Go. So first of all, you need the reserved keyword called var, right? So we have const, we have var, right? So these are the reserved keywords. So this var is trying to tell us that we want to create a variable, right? So that is the reserved keyword, the particular data structure you want to create, which is a variable. Variables store data. Then we also need your identifier. So the identifier is going to be the particular name you want to use to identify it. So it can be full, it can be any name, right? That is the identifier. Then it must always be followed by a data type, because as we said, Go is static typed programming language, so you need to define the type. It is weakly typed, so you can even go without a type, but you can still, it is recommended that you specify the type, right? So we have your reserved keyword var, specify that you want to create a variable, then the identifier, right? Then you also have your type. So types always follows your identifier. So this is how to create a variable. So that's the first method. So this is variable declaration. So you can also declare a variable, and then you can also define and initialize it by giving it a value. So var, the reserved keyword, I want to create a variable. This is my identifier, full, and I'm giving the data type of integer, and then I'm assigning it to a particular value, 7. So this must correspond to this. If this is an integer, this must also be an integer. If this is a float, this must also be a float, right? Very nice. There's also a short format which is called the walrus operator, in which instead of you specifying the word var, you can just go straight away with the identifier and then the walrus operator, then you assign a value. So that is how to work with variables in Go. So let's see how to work with variables, then move on to arrays and then slices, because we'll be working with these things most of the time. So let's go back to our workspace. Then I'm going to create a simple option. So to create a variable, as we said, just go with var. Let's make this one. Let's go by this option. Right, we have var, right? Variable declaration, as you can see. Then I'll specify something like full, right? So this then it's going to be so this is going to be the data type. So this is variable declaration. And in Go, anytime you declare a variable, you must always use it. So if I go back and I just go with fmt.println, and I specify that I want to print this thing, so this is going to be a variable, and then I'll call it as full, right? If I go with this and I run it again, so to run it, as we learned earlier on, to run anything, you just go with this option. So we have to move into our directory, which is the Go basic directory. It's going to be Go. Let's cd into this particular directory, cd into my Go basics directory, and then inside my Go basics directory, as you can see from here, we have our variables, right? Go variables. So that's what I'm trying to run. So to run it, it's just going to be like this: Go run our Go variables, right? So So this is how to run it. So it's going to run it perfectly and give us our result. So most of the time we have not assigned any value to it, right? So we just gave it we just declared it. We not assign any value to it. So that's something very simple that you have to understand. So that is variable declaration. So let's quit this variable declaration. You can see that it gave us a value of 0 because we not assign anything to it. So this is how to declare a variable declaration, right? Very simple, and give us a value of 0. Again, in case I want to check for the data type of this, I can just go with fmt.println. This is going to be to check for the data type, right? You can use this option, the print f. So the print f is going to tell us that this is the format I want to use, right? So I'm going to supply a particular format. This is something similar to format in Python, something like this. There's a f string in Python, right? Or something like format if you're coming from Python. So like this option, right? Something like that, right? So this option, or in case you are working with C and all of those things, so something like that in Python. So let's see how to work with this. So print a format, and I want to specify the particular format I want to get. So you can use this one to get the data type, to do some interesting stuff. So let's see an example. So to get the data type, just go with the percentage and the T. This is useful for people that are coming from other programming languages like C++ and the rest. Very simple, right? Then I'll specify that I want to get the type of this particular foo. So as we specify, this is the identifier, this is the reserved keyword, is a variable, the data structure is a variable, the identifier is foo, that is the name, and then the data type is int, right? So if I go with this option, it's going to tell me that the data type of this particular one is called an integer. So let's run it again. I'll go back again, run it. The variable was 0, right? Because there's nothing there. Then it's going to tell me the data type of this particular one. So it is integer. So this integer is the same thing that we referred here, right? Very, very simple. So that is how to declare a variable, right? Now, we have seen how to declare a variable. We have seen how to check for the data type. Check for data type, right? Using this printf and then the %t, right? That is how to work with it. Very simple. Now let's move on to how to not just declare a variable but also initialize it. So this is going to be, you declare a variable and then you initialize it, or you define it, right? You assign a value to it. I said initialize, right? So let's go back to the picture to give you an idea of what we did. So we have seen how to do this, right? So this is the reserved keyword, the identifier, the type. You have seen how to get a type. Now we can also assign a particular value to it using this particular format, right? So you can just go back again. This one method, right? So in case I want to declare a variable, initialize it, I can also do the same thing. So it's going to be var, right? Let's give it, like, let's say name. Then giving it a variable name. I'm giving the particular data type of string, right? String, perfect. So this is going to be a variable with called name, which is of the data type string, and then I'm assigning a value to it. So this is going to assign a value to it. So variable declaration and then initialization or assignment. It can be also called it as assignment. Assigning a value to it. So if I run it, this is going to give us the option. Now, if I don't use this one, it's going to give us an error. I must always use it before I compile it, right? So if I go back and I run it again, it's going to tell me that this was not used, right? So name was declared, but it was not used. So in Go, anytime you declare something, you have to always use it, which makes it very interesting so that you don't have vultures, right? You don't have dead code within your own, you don't have unused code. So anything you declare, you must always use, right? Perfect. So to use it, let's go back and go with fmt.print line. Now pass in the name, or let's put as what is your name? So what is your name, right? Then I'll pass in something like this, right? So I'll just go with the name. So now if I save it and I run it again, let's go back and run. So go variables, go run variables. We are going to see that it's going to give us the result, right? It's going to first of all work on this. So the variable was 0, int was defined, and what is your name, just right? And you can see that there was no space here, right? So to be able to bring a space, can also bring this option here, \n, and then it's going to render it and give us our space. So if I go back and I run it again, now you're going to see the difference between them, right? So it's supposed to be this option. So \, right? I always forget. So let's run it again. Perfect. So this is just about variables, right? So you see that the variable is 0. We did not assign anything to it. We declared it. We did not assign any value to it. So it gave us a default value of 0. Then the data type was int. And then what is your name? This is a string, right? This was what we wrote here and it came out. Perfect. So that is another way of declaring a variable and then assigning a value to it, right? It's not only just integers, but it can be several data types. Very nice. Now let's see another simple format in which you can also declare a variable. So this is going to be the shorthand. Right. So in case you don't want to be using this one, the shorthand as we saw in the picture is just go with the particular identifier, right, or the variable name, then your walrus operator, right, and then just go with your value. So that's another way of declaring a variable and assigning a value to it. It's a shorthand declaration. So it's going to be like this. So I can just go with age, right, then the walrus operator, right, and I'll just specify that I want the age to be, let's say, 24. Right. Now, as I said, if you declare a variable, you must always use it. So format dot print line. I can see that this is going to be your age. So age. I pass in my age. Right. So if I run it like this, let's run it again. Go back to our location. Run it. So we have seen how to define a variable and then declare it and assign value to it. So very cool and very nice. So that is something very simple about variables in Go. Very simple, very cool. So these things that we have done, right, this one, I can also declare this variable outside of it and use it here. It's still going to work, right? So that is something very nice about Go. So let me explain what I was saying. So you can also declare a variable outside this main function and then use it within the main function, right? So let's try an example. So this is going to be from outside. Right, declaration. So we are going to, I'll call that outside declaration, which is going to be like a global, right? Most of the variables are usually global. So like if I go with, let's say var, let's call it as my particular type of job I do, right? Job, and then I'll give it as a string, which I'll assign it as, let's say, in this case, we are all data scientists, right? So data scientists for now, right? Okay, so this is a variable that I'm declaring outside our main function, right? And it is available in scope of this particular place, so it's global, so I can also use it here, right? So if I come back here, let's use it here. So we're going to use it here, usage in main function. So it's going to be something very simple. So if I go with fmt.println, then I'll specify that this is going to be job, right? Then this goes with the job option, right? So let's make it like this, right? So let's run it and see. So if I come back again and I run it, it's that although it is outside the main function, it is still being seen, right? So that is something very simple. So if I go with the var, it becomes global. I can use it everywhere. But if I use the walrus operator, this one, we can't use it outside of the main function. So if I come back and I try it out here, right? So let's try that one. So these ones allows it to be declared outside of functions, right? As we have seen an example from here. So we can actually declare it outside our function here, right? Very cool. But if I use the walrus operator, the shorthand, I can't use it outside the function. So let's try an example. So this is going to be non-declared statement, right? So if I go with the shorthand and I specify, let's say I want to specify something like, let's say gender, right? Walrus operator, and I'll say that this is going to be male, right? So this that I've declared here, right, which I've specified with the walrus operator, it cannot be accessed here. That's why it's given us this particular red, right? So syntax error. So non-declaration statement outside main function. So even if I bring it here, if I print it out here, so fmt.println, then I'll specify that I want to print this particular gender here, right? I go with gender, right? This is supposed to be small letter. If I go with this option, I come back and I run it here, it's going to give us an error, right? So the syntax error. So if you want to specify variables outside the function, you have to use the var option, right? Which makes it global. But if you use the shorthand, it's not going to work, right? Only this shorthand is only for functions, right? So this is only for functions, only inside functions, right? Something very simple. So that is a simple overview about working with variables in Go. So to recap, to declare a variable, you just go with this option, var, right, which makes it available globally. Then this is going to be a reserved keyword specifying that I want a variable, and this is going to be the identifier, the name that you want to give to the variable, the data type. So types always follows the identifier. then this is how to declare a variable. You can also declare a variable and assign it to a value, right? Or you can also use the shorthand, and then which is must always be within a function, right? Otherwise it's not going to work. So that is a simple overview about working with variables in Go. So one more thing, as we did here, you can also declare a variable like this once, right, and then assign a value to it the other way. So this is another option. So you declare and then you assign value. So let's try an example. So let's create variable, right? I'm going to call variable A, right? Then I'll declare the variable. So let's give it, as I say, remember this, I'll give it a type of, let's say type, yeah. Then let's specify that this is an integer of, let's say 25, right? Or I can just go straight away with it without defining it. So I've declared it, then I can also assign the value to it by going with what? 25. So this is another way, or 24. Then I can just print this one out. Don't forget we have FMT to help us print line, then the A, right? So if I run it now, it's going to work perfectly for us. So let's go back, check it out. Hopefully we forgot to remove this one, so let's take this one out. Let me uncomment it out, and let's uncomment this one out, and let's run it again. So there are no errors, so let's run it, and now we're going to see it's going to work perfectly for us, right? 24, right? Very good. So that's another way. So you can declare a variable here and assign a value next. Very cool and very nice. In case you don't also want to do this faster, you can also go without the specifying the type. It's also going to work, right? The type is going to be inferred straight away. So that is something very simple. So let's try that one out before we move on. So it is not a must to always define a type, right? As I'm saying, it's not a must. You can also go without it. Go is very, very liberal. So let's try an example. So I'm going to go without declaring a type. So make a declaration without specifying type, right? Data type. So I can do that. It's going to infer it upon it. So let's create a variable. I'm going to call this particular variable. Let's give it something like, let's say, my location or my address where I say, right, perfect. Then I'll specify that I stay in a place called Accra, right? So I can just work on it. So format.print line. I'll specify that this is going to be the address I stay. Let's go with capital A, right? And then from here I'll specify that I stay inside my address. So we did not specify the type, but it's still going to work, right? So if I run it again, it's going to give us our option here, right? So that is very, very free, right? So it is still working, right? And I can even get the type of this, which is fmt.printf, right, to get the print format. And I'll specify that I want the type %t, right? Then let's give it a space, right? And then I'll specify for that particular option variable address. If I also want to print the value, I can also do that by specifying this. So let's go back to this option. This asterisk v, right? I said asterisk. It's not asterisk, it's right, this v, right? And it's also going to help us with that, right? Then I want to bring it again. So this is going to tell us the type, and it's going to tell us the particular value stored within the type. So let's run it again. So go run go variables.go. It's going to give us our result. So Accra, right? It was able to give us that the type of Accra is a string, and then it's giving us our value. So to get the value back, just go with the %v, right? To get the type, %t. That is a simple overview about working with variables in Go. So thank you for watching this tutorial. So in the next session, we'll be trying to see how to work with arrays, and then how to work with slices. And then later we'll move on to the statistics, because this is not fully about Go, just an overview about how to work with Go. See you another time. Stay blessed. Bye.